Thank you, Lauren.
Hello, and welcome to our March edition of the Design Digital Signage Power Hour series. We put these series on in conjunction with the Digital Signage Federation. So thank you to the DSF for helping us make these wonderful webinars each month. For those that are viewing live, this webinar has been approved for one CTS, CTSI, and CTSD credit. Please allow 5 to 7 business days for those RUs to appear on your transcript. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at webinars@avixa.org. For today's webinar, we will run time-wise about 45 to 60 minutes. The audience questions will be addressed by the speakers throughout the webinar as well as at the conclusion. Please enter your questions into the Q&A box that can be found by clicking the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen. Also, please don't forget to introduce yourself in the event chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And please don't enter your questions into the event chat because those tend to get lost. Any of our recorded webinars can be found at avixa.org/webinars, and this webinar will be available in that same location in approximately 5 business days. Today's panel will be led by Brian Mazzaros of OpenEye Global. He'll be joined by Parrish Chapman of Samsung, Alicia Esposito from Retail Touchpoints, and Beth Warren with Creative Realities, Inc. So now I'll turn it over to Brian to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on, I guess, where you're at. Very excited to be hosting. I'm Brian Mazzaros from OpenEye, and I am joined by some very esteemed colleagues with far greater insights around social media than myself. So I guess we'll just go around the room real quick and let everyone kind of give a quick little intro. Beth, we'll start with, yeah, sure. Beth, we'll start with you.
Happy to jump in. Hey, everybody. My name is Beth Warren. I'm with Creative Realities Reflect, and I am SVP of Marketing. I also consult to our retail clients. I've been with the company 10 years, and we are end-to-end digital signage solutions.
Parrish, yourself?
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today, and so happy to be here. Parrish Chapman, Director of B2B Sales for Samsung, the retail US market, really focusing on customer experience with display as kind of the backbone, but it also encompasses everything we're talking about today, social and software, and really excited to listen and learn about the topic today as well.
And Alicia.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Esposito. I'm the VP of Content for Retail Touchpoints and the Retail Innovation Conference and Expo. We are a media network for retail professionals, and our expertise is the customer-facing touchpoints of retail strategy. So a lot about the intersection of store design and experience and technology. Anything social media and social commerce, I'm totally game. So I'm very excited to be here.
So even, I guess, I'll let the cat out of the bag, Alicia, but you're starting a TikTok account, and we're going to share that with everyone as we go into it. So we're off and running already on this webinar. So I had to share those details. More to follow later on. So stay around. Thomas,
very new still. Be kind to me.
I don't know. She said at the end.
So at the end.
So I guess this is a good segue, and I really love this topic because there's so many different paths I think we can travel with this. And really where I want to start and what I'm keen to dive into is emerging trends. We laugh about TikTok, and we joke about that, but reality, there's a lot of trends revolving around TikTok and Instagram and other channels, especially user-generated content that is trending, that is very impactful. So I'm kind of curious to kind of start this off, and Alicia, we'll start with you actually. Of just kind of seeing, what really is the significance of user-generated content? How do you see that taking shape today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a trend that we've been tracking for a few years now, but we really saw it reach a whole new level of importance with the pandemic. Obviously, people were shopping online more than ever. People were not interacting with each other in person, didn't really have that one-to-one or one-to-few opportunity to connect and weigh ideas and purchase options or brand options. I was actually able to pull some fresh data around, what is happening, through social media. And just to call out the significance and the opportunity, consumers who interact with ratings and reviews alone convert at about 120% the rate of those who do not. 88% of shoppers specifically look for photos and videos provided by other consumers before committing to a purchase. Those are both from Power Reviews. And I think it just really speaks to the role that social media plays in our day-to-day. Even if we're not intending to make a purchase, social media is a source of inspiration. It's a source of context that personally, I feel no level of branded content can really provide. And it allows that added insight and validation from people who are like us. And I just know that personally from my own experiences, but also from a lot of the brands that we've been speaking with.
So now, Beth, from a retail perspective, do you see more retail brands really acknowledging the impact social has and wanting to tie that back into the in-store experience?
I don't see it as much as I think I should see it.
Agree.
And that's just, being totally transparent.
Yeah.
Not only is it timely, does it help people discover, make decisions, and of course experience that trust in social proof. What social does is it allows the store to become a place that is community centric. Okay. And that's really, really important because you get the experience of community, how people think and feel about what's being offered in that particular venue, and then to be able to deepen engagement and make connections beyond just what's being sold. It also serves as a role for support for sales associates, et cetera, because it's, again, another proof point. Alicia mentioned ratings and rankings. That is something that is fantastic from a tactical perspective to bring into shelf. So I really, really advocate those who are practicing technology across verticals like retail to be able to bring social in. And one last thing about social, which I think shouldn't be overlooked, is its power to regenerate itself, because you're always getting a fresh supply of content. And we know that content creation is expensive, and it's definitely a line item on the marketer's budget, which and probably Parrish can speak to this as well. It's often the reason why a deal will fall through.
Well, here's the
right.
Yeah, well, here's, I think this is a good question, and Parrish, is on to you. You talk about, that curation process of content, keeping it fresh, but at the same time too, there's that rawness attached to it. How do both of those play, or how do you see that kind of allowing this contribution of new content and this conversation and this kind of social community that you're talking about, Beth? Parrish, kind of, keen to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's believable, it's authentic, and people love believable, authentic content, and they love that's relatable. And I think when it's at the time of buy and you have the trend data that Beth spoke about and this information presented in a way, people don't want to see perfect, beautiful content. What they want to see is something they can relate to, that's very believable to them. And this is where social is so powerful. Fans say the best things and they show the best things, right? And I think that's what we're seeing, is this power of content and people coming together with product at the same time. And we're transferring the experience from a mobile device, maybe to a larger display where it's even really a really wonderful experience, interactive, right? So I think the freshness of the content, when you talk about fashion changing out once a quarter, or even product sets on seasoned, that this really does augment it and give you a place to really interject at the right time this believable content.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole in this question. I feel like I might sort of put my foot in my mouth on this one, but obviously we're coming out of 2 years with a pandemic, and so did any of that contribute to this as a trend, or were we going there before that even happened in 2019?
I definitely
So if I could, go ahead.
Sorry, Parish. I definitely think it was accelerated by the pandemic. Would you agree? Parish would agree.
I think,
Yeah.
Beth, you're right. Not only did it accelerate the movement towards it, but the age groups who were using it, when you look at the trend data, grew substantially. When you talk about 82-year-old doing buy online, pick up in the store, and they wanted to check the grandkids and see the content on these different social media platforms, not only did it move quickly, but the people who were utilizing it grew very quickly as well. And I think this is what really did help it explode, right? And the number of minutes online and the social content creation really did help out.
So, I mean, I for one spent a lot of time in helping my parents set up a social account during it too. So if not for nothing, I became an expert on how to do Instagram.
Well,
So-
there's one other point there, Brian, is that the social platforms made it easier and frictionless to buy inside the application.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's
Very
another
good point.
important trend or to
Yeah.
note, so that you might not necessarily have the intention to buy, but because it's a place people go for stories and discovery, you then have a mechanism to act now. So
Sure.
it replaces what went away with buy online, pick up in store, because you couldn't be impulsed, right? Because you had to think ahead of time when you were ordering. So social media in this case is an invitation for impulse, because you see things that you don't expect and then you're able to act on it. So how do you take that notion and then bring it into the store so that it fundamentally acts in the same way, whether it is on your phone, could be, or it could be as part of a screen experience?
Yep.
Well, here's, I mean, it's Beth, I mean, that's a very important point. And I guess that kind of opens up the question of, what are those barriers to entry? I think exactly as you said, I mean, how do you activate that? How do you position that in store? And really what is there for someone, what are those tools, or what are those opportunities or, challenges to start integrating that into a store? CMS, CMS systems, how would you speak to that?
I think it's easier than ever for us to integrate social in a number of ways. If we're there already, or if retailers are using, or brands are using technology for display purposes, for displaying content, this is just one simple example, chances are that media device or that content management software can be programmed to be able to bring a social experience in and have that behave in a certain way. So this is what baffles me as to why we're not seeing it as much. And I think there's a few reasons. It's new. People aren't, terribly excited about any risks associated with showing content that might not be up to par from a brand's perspective. But there's also addressable ways for things like content or social moderation to help out in that case, and to really take the burden off the brands so that, only the best is put forth.
Yeah, I think
Parish. No, please, Alicia. No, please.
I was just going to jump in and say, Beth, I 100% agree as far as like the main barriers from a brand perspective. Brands almost need to get out of their own way when it comes to social media, because I think to Parish's point, that authenticity, that in some cases, that rawness, right? The imperfection of using a product a first time or trying something on and maybe it's not quite right, but it creates an opportunity for other consumers to learn, getting out of their own way of this is what our brand should represent. This is how we want to be presented in the world.
Being a little bit more relaxed about that.
So
authenticity.
Can I?
Yeah, Parish,
so I think barriers, I want to talk about barriers. I think this is so important. There's third-party companies out there now selling access into social that could be pulled into brick and mortar. Samsung we launched a social display with Sprinklers, our partner. We have an app built into our Tizen wrap. But you'd also pull right off a social channel. Even if a company approves it, you can pull right down to that point and have a great experience. So there's really 3 to 4 ways right now to get social in the stores or inside a brick and mortar to leverage it. But I think the number one concern is this. Let's talk about it real quick. Is we don't want images that aren't on brand or scare people or really offensive, right? And I think now, if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I would have been okay, we have some issues here, but now with the software we're seeing, you really can filter and go out and pull the positive, take these segments in and have them come together to where they're very magical. And it's all automatic. And of course, you want a human to approve branding no matter what. We have the ability to do it all automatic now. I will never do that. I want a human to say, this is okay, right? But I think let's take all the positive of social and let's focus it. Let's do the reviews, right? Let's do the sentiment, the trend data that's happening with color. And I dress differently when I'm in Southern California than I do when I'm in New York, right? And all these things are so powerful for us. And I think the last thing, the barrier is the people who are making the decision don't understand social, how powerful it is. And I think that's our number one concern, beside the legal and the security part of it and the branding, is that when I talk to a lot of influencers at the right level that have the checkbook, if you will, they really don't understand social.
Well, I think you brought up a good point. One, I loved you were kind of talking about how you don't really want to go through that automated process. And Alicia, I think you were kind of touching on this a little bit, but how important is it really for a brand to have a strategy in place before, going down this path? Because there's a lot of pitfalls that a brand can fall into. I mean, Paris, you touched on it for the imagery. It's not just put in a CMS and let it do its magic. I need a strategy as a brand. I need a strategy so that I'm I'm taking my audience and connecting them and, demonstrating and taking full advantage of that. I mean, how critical is necessary for a brand to, have that bandwidth, identify a strategy before even implementing any of these?
I think it's absolutely critical. And I think it's also governed by what category you're playing in.
Mm-hmm.
High involvement categories that require demonstration and education and learning as part of the purchase process would benefit greatly from social strategy, user-generated content coming in and being able to show how things work and how they've utilized it, Yep. So determining what your social in-store strategy should be as native and natural as what your e-commerce or what your just, social media strategy is in general. That needs to be discussed, and it should be invited to the table in the planning stage for sure. And that was just one of the examples.
Do you think it's wrong? I mean, this is another one of those questions. I mean, you look at AI. Is it wrong for a brand just to kind of assume that, you put in the technology and kind of use the AI element to just automate and develop this strategy on its own? Or, does it again come back that the brand needs that starting point to align all of this investment to support that model or that approach?
So,
like, where does AI fit in?
I want to piggyback on what,
Yep, please.
I think AI does fit in for combing and understanding what's available in social media. But I think, as Beth mentioned, number one, are we going to use social in the store to be an influence and trend setting? Are we going to use it for branding? Are we going to use it for showing the positive things a brand is doing away from the physical brick and mortar? How they're supporting, maybe, is it social awareness or the good things for the economy? Or is it going to be used for employee training, right? And I think that AI comes in at that point to take the things out of social and focus it in the right areas of the store at the right time. And I think that's really the strategy that we're looking at with our clients, is you can use it very specifically, and the positive outcome is really amazing. So yeah, I think AI has a place, but you have to focus it.
I couldn't agree more, especially in its value of responding to who's in front of a particular screen or area, because AI allows you to then be that much more personal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the power of personalization married to social, I think, is an incredible force for selling.
So with everything we see going on, who would you say is really doing it well? What are you seeing out there in terms of, examples that people can benchmark against, or can just, are just doing it right? Who has a good grasp on it? Beth, we'll start with you.
I think Sephora does an incredible job with their social strategy and bringing it into their shopping channels. I think Chipotle and Taco Bell for QSR does a great job about reflecting social sentiment back inside their menu experience, inside the mortar experience. So those are my two favorites. I'd like to see more of it from Target, for example, or from stadiums and arenas. Tell me which laboratory I should go to, or what where's the shortest queue. I'd like to hear more fan reactions, when I'm on site in a venue. I think that would be terrific. So, but those are two, more commercial examples that I think for the QSR space and retail.
You just want to get out on the big screen in the stadium, don't you?
I just want to eat is basically.
I know your style.
And I think, Brian, you look at like Safa Mattress, who was originally an all digital brand, and they really were digitized. And now they've gone back in reverse back into brick and mortar. Yep. They really use reviews. When you look at, I think social can be used if you look at, you only buy appliance every 15 years, you only buy a mattress every 10 to 11 years. I think those reviews on social, and what we're seeing is proper placement and how you comb those in place is so important. And I think when you say who's doing social well, fashion is much different from these long-sided buys of a mattress, or, how do you make mayonnaise sexy? I can do it with social, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we're talking about. And influencers, I want to see more influencers. You could place, somebody making a great sandwich with mayonnaise on the end cap, and all of a sudden it really is sexy then, right? So I think we are just starting this, right?
Those influencers, because it's a whole other territory. The influencers, because I read a statistic that said that marketers are going to be, their biggest spend is going to be supporting and funding influencers to help them, create branded experiences. So those influencers, the people who are out there championing their position on certain brands and services, are amazing advocates for brick and mortar.
Two brands, sorry, really quickly, two brands that are really doing a good job of this that I want to make sure I call out. Aerie, without a doubt, has really built out its influencer strategy to not just be those behemoth, macro influencers, like six-figure contracts to multi-million-dollar contracts, nano and micro influencers building out their community in an authentic way, ensuring that they're meeting the objectives of their mission of being, a retailer, a brand for everybody, and extending that not just through their social channels. They amplify all of that user-generated content into essentially every marketing channel and every e-commerce channel that I've seen from the brand. Their product pages, email creative, site creative. And I think that gets to the nitty-gritty of like the value of UGC. That is content that you can continually monetize and reuse across channels, including in stores. And another brand that I just want to give props to really, really quickly is Caraway. So they have retailer partnerships, but they're largely D2C. Beautiful content from influencers, from consumers. And then if you go to their site, very editorially driven, but also very UGC and reviews driven. They have search reviews by keywords, search reviews by ratings, search reviews by this. Like, it gives the consumer so many options to validate their purchases from like-minded individuals. And like, their products aren't cheap. Like a pot and pan set is like about $400, right? Wow. So you want to make sure that you're making that decision. And like, you could search by environmental value, like it's incredible, like the granularity that they're getting into.
Well, let me ask you this, Alicia. I mean, you're talking about, conversion and, obviously using reviews and using that the influencers to assist with that. I mean, obviously that's a critical part of it, because then that starts to tie in full circle about an ROI from an investment in the strategy. Do you think that there's more people are really understanding that impact of reviews and influencers in a retail environment versus it being online? I mean, we were all familiar, Amazon reviews, transactions taking place online. It's very different when the conversation goes into the brick and mortar. How has that been adapted? How do you see that changing? It just, even in some of the examples that you just referenced, I mean, what is kind of like interesting about that?
I think going into the store, I think there's more that can be done. I think there are some brands that are testing things like making their stores a center for content creation. I don't think it's gotten to the level of like integration with social channels or UGC in the store, but brands like Beauty Counter, Old Spice has like had their barber shop that became like a hub for creating social media content. Walmart used their store associates to drive their live streaming, their live shopping. I think the dots need to be connected a little bit more. And I think that's where the strategy comes in. It's not like something they can just set and forget. I think you need to reverse orchestrate from your goals.
I was just going to say, I mean, how much of a struggle is that in the conversation? Because it's all about the journey. And obviously it's a different voice when you want someone to come into the store. The tonality changes when they're in the store. It's a different CTA. It's a different action. And how do they adapt to that, or realizing that that voice needs to change, that audience is interacting at a different moment. The conversion is very different.
Yeah, I think that's where the local community opportunity comes in. And I feel like Parrish, like you may have something to say about this. Like the value of going into the store is like, you know, the people, you know, the assortment, you know, you can find certain products, or there's an event going on. Like there are local close knit connections to that community level. And like we're seeing more retailers attempt to make their stores more community driven. And I think incorporating social media into that mix just amplifies that. I think it was Foot Locker is emphasizing more community driven retail experiences and store concepts. And social is a driver to the store, but it's also a cycle for engagement, right? Like how can we repurpose that content from the store and, you know, share favorite items? So I just think it just adds a layer of, you know,
I think another brand, I was just saying, another brand I think has been good too that has been mentioned is Nike. I think Nike does a very good job to just with their social campaigns and also some of their stores too, and how bringing in that social content of people with the product, interacting with the product. The Nike live stores, you know, it's all based upon product in the store that's relative to purchasing habits that are taking place in that area. I think Santa Monica has a store, a couple in LA, and they're
in Soho in New York City. Nike's store uses their digital, you know, activity to be able to deliver QR codes that you can then socialize. The content that comes to you from then you can push out. And so it creates this terrific loop. And it also gives them a platform to be able to share their social or their, how do I say, their environment sustainability strategy, their influencer programs, et cetera. Their other programming then is presents a natural way for it to be integrated into the shopping ecosystem. So they do a great job with social interaction.
And I think, Beth, just piggybacking on, I think when we talk about influencers, and you just mentioned social awareness, one thing we are seeing, we can talk about a real live example at a Panico salon in New Jersey. You have micro influencers, the beauty advisors now can build a social bond with their customers and the brand at the point of purchase and design. And, you know, when I take that picture in and say, make me look like Brad Pitt, and they throw it up on the screen and do a hashtag at the end and then they share it, they're building their social brand inside of that company brand with that consumer. And what we're seeing is when you talk about net promoter score or employee net promoter score, employees are happier when they can use technology that makes them interactive with their clients or their guests or make them an influencer. You know, styling, one-on-one shopping is back right now, right? And we all know that, you know, beauty's back because we're going back to the office with hydration and color trends. So I think social is really a great way to pull people in, but also to have these influencers that actually work for you and they can build their brand as well.
Let me ask. Oh, sorry, Beth. No, please.
No, I was just going to, you asked about ROI, and I think it's important to call out to those who, you know, where measurement is absolutely vital, is the impact on the transaction size and the, you know, the ticket and the basket. when you have ratings and rankings, or when you're using user-generated content in a way to support the visual merchandising strategy, is there a correlation that you see at the register? And are we able to identify and isolate that versus non-social stores or situations?
Mhm.
So that's another way of
Yeah.
looking at.
And I think, Beth, that ROI needs to be on basket size, but also how are we using mobile and digital display in store to get people to stay longer? We
Yes,
know if we get somebody to stay an extra 3 to 3.5 minutes in the environment, they're happier, they interact more, and they buy more long term, right? It's the total value of that client. And I think a lot of times we get wrapped into how much we sell in today, but really what we're really focused on is making sure people go inside that brick and mortar with their mobile or display device and travel somewhere they wouldn't have traveled, stay longer, and we increase the lifetime value of that client, right? That's part of that whole ROI strategy we have. And I think you're right on point with what you're saying on the metric and understanding that in the business.
Do you see, I mean, just on ROI, and putting in those metrics and how to approach that? Do you think a lot of brands were kind of aware that there is an ROI to be had off of the social strategy, like in store? Because I feel like in some cases that some brands are positioned to say look at it not across all channels, they're just looking at it online or mobile, but not really looking at it. There's a transactional opportunity. There's a way to measure that in the store. Parrish, you said it, whether they're staying longer, there's a the increased basket size, even loyalty too, attaching into certain loyalty programs. And do they really understand that there is a number to be had by it?
So I can answer the question by saying, do they understand it? Not 100%, but it was the number one talking point at NRF this year for our booth and partners we had in our booth and our clients, as Beth knows this as well. And really, we talked about the analytics and how to achieve an understanding of the ROI, brand impression. And I think that we're getting there. But every conversation we have with clients today is we have to explain the ROI and prove our value. Because I like to make things simple. And this is the way I like to say it. If we had a website and we had no reporting, no analytics, we probably wouldn't have that website very long. And retail is the same way, brick and mortar. We need to treat physical brick and mortar like a website. The banner ads in front of the store, how long people are there, how long they're traveling through, the click is their wallet, and then the final buy and clienting after the fact. So I think we're getting there. We have the tools now out of the box to make it happen. But yes, we're traveling there very quickly, and clients are demanding that as part of the equation.
Do you see any the other sort of topic, just maybe taking a step back that I'm kind of curious about is long-term relationships, and social, there's so much saturation from all brands out there trying to capture and create awareness. Does something like a long-term relationship, is that exist, or is that a myth in terms of having a right strategy, having that conversation, providing those reviews? Can someone be easily persuaded within a matter of a tweet to go into a different direction? Like, does that exist? Does a long-term relationship exist with a brand anymore today?
I think so. I believe,
Yes.
believe
Go ahead, Beth.
yes. And I think that when you're authentic and consistent, that is your recipe for long-term lifetime value. That's what I think.
Yeah. And the follow through too. So if someone interacts with your content, your reviews, everything that you're sharing on social media or is integrated on your site, if the outcome is favorable to them, they're going to say, oh, like these people are actually being truthful with their influencer strategy and their UGC strategy. I don't know if you guys have seen the meme of like, saw it on Instagram, got it delivered, and they do like the comparison. And sometimes it looks nothing like it. That is what you do not want. And especially if you're going to be incorporating your influencers who are supposed to be in a way like the face of your brand, the authentic, interpretation of your brands. There has to be that full cycle. You have to follow through. I mean, you can have the most beautiful and fun and authentic content ever, but if it doesn't relate to the end product and the experience the individual consumer has, then.
Yeah. I think the follow through part I think that's the number one, because it's all about follow through and consistency too.
Consistency is very important. Yeah.
You can't keep changing. You have to show up as that same authentic real, genuine experience time and time again.
Yeah. Now, I know we talked a lot about, I don't want to go too far away, but we talked a lot about retail. And obviously that's a very, easy, I say easy, sort of vertical to speak about. But, I think the reality is that you do see this playing out with other verticals as well. Themed entertainment, obviously Disney is very notorious, obviously for their social outreach. But even in other, various museums, out of home campaigns as well. There's just notorious amount of really great campaigns that are taking place, and even into other environments, from hospitals to even some corporations that are doing it. Do you see this? If ever you're talking about continuing to grow past retail and starting to kind of saturate into these other verticals?
I do 100%, especially healthcare. When you talk about the practitioners and the relationship you have with your care providers and donors, and you could have a wall that, I've seen even some great campaigns where this baby looks like, this person in store, the nurses, and they're really using social unique in some great ways. And also to bring awareness to disease and health, I think is so important nowadays. You look at what we just went through, all of us, and how important the health, and I mean physical, mental, everything about it, right? We see healthcare as a big growth vehicle for this type of a solution, or this type of social focused, but also enterprise office, right? Everything from a lobby board to an employee area where social events and concerts happening that weekend, and what that company's doing to be a better corporate citizen. I definitely think it's growing, and it'll be wonderful.
Beth, Alicia, any thoughts of what you've been seeing just past retail?
I like seeing what's happening in hospitality, how hotel brands are using UGC to kind of paint a different kind of picture, especially now, Parrish, to your point. I think it's that way of sparking that inspiration and that wanderlust, so to speak. And I think now more than ever, people want to see new things. They want to go to new places. And I think, how hotels kind of present that, and, whether it's through events or, just, share your experience, like in your room or, poolside, like that's what gets people excited. So that's one particular area that I'm watching.
That's a good one. And one that I've observed too with great social interaction is fitness and health clubs. Like great,
good one.
Yes. And that makes so much sense also, because each one of the trainers there is an influencer in and of itself. So just, and of course this accelerated because of the pandemic as well with at-home workouts. Now people are returning to the gym environment and can bring all of that great content with them and be able to then have that boomerang back. So I do think that for gyms and any health and wellness, medical and otherwise.
My beloved Peloton. My beloved Peloton.
I was going to say, I wonder how many gyms are going to be taking from the Peloton playbook a little bit, because they really do an incredible job with their community and using social, using their instructors as influencers. I saw my fair share of courses, meditation moments on Instagram, those things beyond the immediate brand interaction. And I think there's a real opportunity.
They sort of took the story right off the bike into your living room or into your bedroom and made all the moments of the day really important and mindful. So, and then giving us ways to have that snackable content. So, yeah, I agree.
So what's the big? I mean, we touched on a lot in just even, I think, in like 40 minutes. But I mean, what's that one takeaway that you would say? I mean, we have a lot of people that are listening in, and they're from all parts of the country, and and I'm sure I have just a variety of different clients. Like, what's the one power statement just in regards to social and thinking through with it and going down this path of really bringing it into your overall strategy in the environment that you operate in? Like, what would you advise them to do? Just even, let's just say from a starting point, what is a good tip just from starting point to really kind of start enacting upon a social strategy?
I'll jump in because I don't want everyone to show me up. I'll say,
stop it.
Start the barrier low. I would say watch and listen. Watch what your audience is sharing, listen to what they're saying, and almost use that as a starting point for what they want, what they're looking for from your brand, and use that as a barometer for your content strategy. Like, what are they asking for? Like, what are they looking to validate? I do content every day, and that's always what I'm thinking about. So I think that's really the first most important step.
I'm going to go next, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because Alicia said it, and I'm going to just jump on it, which is content strategy. Don't think of social in store as another thing to think about. Lump it in with content. This is an example. Instead of creating a brand video that's going to play on a loop over and over and over again, think about the value of the social platforms and what your users are doing and saying on social to make a persuasive pitch in store, because people trust people more than brands, and you'll have just an endless supply. So if you're thinking about social as a content mechanism, then I think you're thinking in the right direction. And I think our digital integrators out there will have a really good conversation with their customers in that regard.
I think number one, the attorneys are always whispered in my ear when I meet with clients. They're very scared. They have a big baseball bat nowadays, and we have software. We have a bunch of technologies that comb and clean and provide a safe environment. And sometimes the legal beagles are a barrier just to have the conversation. And I think the content is so powerful. Let me say it again. It's so powerful and low cost compared to what my brands are currently doing.
Good point.
We said it already. I think you got to start. You have to start small. But most of my clients are very scared of the legal consequences with social, and it's okay. We have a platform to deal with this. We have a way to get approval to use this content, and we need to trust the technology and verify. But I think also you need to understand what is your strategy. And you can have a broad strategy, but you don't, and Beth has said this, you cannot use it like a normal marketing vehicle. You'll fail miserably. And the last thing I think is consensus. I deal sometimes with 400 people in a room to get one little thing done. And I think that we all need to agree how to start and then grow a program. But just starting is very important with this philosophy of social. And we need to understand the social experts versus a legal expert versus a marketing expert, because it's so different and it's so radical. And I think sometimes we're allowing people to make decisions at some of the brands I deal with that really don't understand the power of social.
It's a very good point all around, especially with legalities. With that, I mean, I'll open it up the floor too. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A, and we'll certainly toss them into our discussion. I'm just kind of thinking, just some questions too, just for everyone. I want to kind of dive in a little bit around generations. Obviously, social is more of a Gen Z thing, but with some of the strategies, is there a fear of alienating other demographics, or especially with age? How does a brand consider that too with their audience, and or maybe an audience that's aging, continue to keep in touch with them, especially with technologies changing? I mean, I laughed before when we talk about our parents. Obviously their use of a phone, and they're going into supermarkets, they're interacting with brands into retail. It's harder for them to have those interactions. How does a brand, at some point it's going to come around onto us? We're the ones that are going to be struggling in how to use the iPhone 35. And what do we do? And how do you see brands adapting to that or taking that challenge on? I'll open that to anyone.
I think the first form of social is word of mouth, right? Yeah. And our parents relied on getting advice from others, from everything from recipes to childcare. So and then things like Consumer Reports, if you remember that institution. So I think as long as the content is laid out in a way that is easy to follow and is beneficial, is authentic, and shows the power of what people have experienced in that particular category or for that particular brand, I think anybody can relate to the help that social can bring in terms of making decisions.
Sure.
Yeah, I think to piggyback onto that, I think it's just understanding the value of the different networks and the content that they best apply for. I mean, even TikTok, we were talking about this before the webinar even started, like TikTok is extending the length of their videos for longer form content. Instagram is trying to level up its like creativity and the capabilities there and focusing on short form content. I think both have merit, but there are so many different creative approaches to content within those parameters. So I think knowing your audience can give you a good guideline for the type of content, the creative approach, and how much I guess you could push limits, if that's, the best way to say it. But like younger generations lean more into like humor and meme culture, whereas maybe, someone who's like a older millennial or something like that wants more instructive content. Like you don't know until you listen to your audience again. So I think,
it's going to be very relevant for Gen X, older, whereas TikTok, which shows short demo videos in a fun, way, is going to be more relevant for a younger target, more, naturally.
Brian, I think it can be summed up like this. Who doesn't like to be happy? Who doesn't like to be happy?
Who doesn't
like to be educated? Who does not like to be informed and connected?
Yeah. Exactly. So here's another question, again, kind of going a little bit random, but bringing social into the retail environment, does someone need to have wall-to-wall screens in order to enact upon, again, this strategy, or is it more of this activation of just creating that awareness to go to your device, to have that conversation continue? Does it always need to be on a screen in the store?
I don't think so. Doesn't always
No,
have
not
to
at
be.
all.
But it's another reason for that screen working harder than just showing videos, for sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like a good way to probably test things out and see the value of connecting those dots for your brand could be QR codes.
Yeah.
Or even just like hashtags as a call to action. So I don't think it's necessarily necessary. Yep, 100%.
So I think it's product placement with display placement at the right time. It's if you want to have a one-on-one, a selling experience, or do you want to have a self-education and play for the consumer and the environment? And I think all those come into play. And I think not every visit has to be a Vegas visit, I call it, right? I think there's some surprise and delight with smaller experiences and one-on-one. And I think that really depends on the brand's systems and what they're trying to achieve.
And having it integrated into the environment organically, not as a bolt-on. So you want to be able to position any social interaction inside what you want people to do on the journey itself. Sure. The fitting room experience is going to be different than the cash wrap, and the front of the store is going to be different than the back. Yes. So being able to utilize the different touch points along the journey and bring social in where it makes the most sense. That's part of your touch point strategy. So, it's just a way to break it down and not underutilize it or overutilize it. You just want to find that sweet spot where it helps people make decisions or helps people engage in a way that is helpful and additive to the journey, not a distraction.
Sure. Again, if anyone has any questions, do please feel free to post them. Another question I have, Parrish, kind of going back, and you talked about legalities, with social, and that opens up sort of the topic of moderation. What platforms or what tools are out there really to kind of help to moderate, just to, obviously we're all fearful of that profanity appearing or that that rogue image, but it is a legitimate concern. And so what tools are out there to to help control or to moderate these feeds or conversations that are taking place?
There's some really strong social listening companies out there that deal with companies of all sizes. My big concern when I talk about our solutions, I need to worry about the one store operator retailer or one hospital operator or the mega operator, right? And there's different tools available really to protect and monitor the social and what happens, blocking out obscene gestures or changing if we decide to use that. But more importantly, there's mechanism to ask the person who posted that content their approval to use it. And so there's a lot of different vehicles out there, and I think it really depends on how much of a social we're trying to pull in and from where. Every social company has different APIs and their approvals on who can play with those APIs. Ever since Facebook had some opportunities many moons ago, that all changed. I think it's very important who you work with. You need to really understand what authority they have, what approval they have, and what mechanism they have that are protected.
I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I think it's very, very possible to utilize a social moderation tool if you have the consensus that you need and enough runway to be able to set up the rules of engagement, if you will, the business rules ahead of time. And by the way, it's scalable too, because it's software, right?
Sure.
So it goes everywhere. One thing could go everywhere, or you can do it per endpoint. So I think there's a lot of flexibility. It's definitely worth mapping for sure.
It's certainly worth the investment. It's definitely worth considering and building that into the overall.
Yes. And that's, I think, the one thing we want to leave this audience with. It is definitely bringing social into an environment, not just retail, but really any environment where somebody's living, working, playing, experiencing, enjoying, et cetera, in their life. I think there could be social moments that will help deepen that experience and get people coming back.
It is the number one conversation with our clients today. Number one.
100%.
How do I harness social and focus it to where it's a benefit for everybody involved?
Do you just, talking about questions and starting points, I mean, do you think people have a good grasp even just from the starting point, just in terms of software and hardware to do this? I mean, does it kind of jump over that and more right into the content strategy piece of it? Do you see that as kind of just, how does that even start, like the conversation?
Social isn't just about the phone. It can be, but it isn't just that. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just about this. I mean, it seems that that's like where your head goes immediately.
Yes.
Again, it's content. And so that content can make appearances wherever you need it to. And I think that's the shift in thinking.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a very good point. Well, perfect. Well, again, I'd like to thank each one of you for sharing your thoughts. This is a topic I think each question itself could have, we could spend an hour on talking about it.
True.
So we'll definitely have to do this again and continue on. So, but no, Alicia and Beth and Parrish, thank you very much for joining and having this conversation. A very lovely afternoon.
And we can continue it in email. So please reach out to us, any of us, because we're happy to help you execute 100%.
Perfect. I think, Lauren, I will hand it over to you just to talk about some exciting, I think, upcoming sessions and just some other closeout notes.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And thank you all again for your time speaking on this topic. I know I learned something, as always, in a different side of digital signage that I hadn't explored before. So thank you for that. And thank you to the Digital Signage Federation again for your content partnership and making this session possible. I am going to go right over here. Let's do some sharing. And a couple of final words. This recording will be available on avixa.org/webinars within about 5 days, and your RU credits will show up in that same time frame as well. Please contact webinars@avixa.org infocom.org if you do have any questions. Our next webinar in this digital signage series will be happening April 6th on how to rethink and repurpose digital signage in the age of acceleration. So I know this post-pandemic conversation will keep on going, and we'll learn how to further the life of that digital signage that we implemented during the pandemic. So look forward to having that conversation. And also InfoComm registration is now open. So please visit infocom.org and complete your registration there. Thank you all and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.